Hello everyone. In this lesson we will implement the clipboard functionality to obtain the clipboard data from the targeted system. The package I chose to use is really simple. It's called paperclip. And it has two functions. Let me show you that in the documentation here. You have a copy function, which puts text into the clipboard, and you have a paste function, which pulls text out of the clipboard. So all we really care about is this paste function. So we'll import that in our code. Let's go ahead and go into our code here. First thing I want to do is put in the code down here at the bottom. I went ahead and bumped my sleep seconds up to 5 seconds just to make it a little longer. We'll eventually take this sleep out, probably next lesson. But for now I'm going to leave it in. And the code will be pasted in right here, right under the while true. All right. Notice that loop underbar count variable is red, so I have to put that in my code. Let me get that out of my notes. We'll put it up here at the top with the other variables that we initialize. Like right here looks good. So this is just going to be used as a counter. That way when we save the file names, they can be unique. Each time we go through the while loop, we can bump up this counter and the file name will be unique. I'll show you how it works. So let me explain the code. Well, before I explain the code, let's import the package. Just come over to your Python packages. Paperclip. Just type that in. You should see it there. And it is paperclip, not paperclip 3 or paperclip fix or these others, just regular paperclip. Say install. I'm at 1.8.2 in February 2024. Almost March. Not quite. Okay. So that should be installing. Go ahead and hover over paste and say import. On that, hover over this exception class here. Import it. And we're good to go. So now let's explain the code. So first thing I do, I increment the counter because we initialize it at 0. So the first file that we write out, see I'm using loop count in that file name. So we want the file name to have a 1 in it the first time through, not a 0. So I'm incrementing it ahead of writing the file. And for beginners, if you're not familiar with this syntax here, think of it as loop underbar count equals loop underbar count plus 1. So we're taking whatever was in loop underbar count previously, we're adding 1 to it, then resaving it. So it's a way to keep counting up. Then the code down here, I'm in a try except block again. So we're going to try to open this file up in write mode this time. Last time we used append mode. This time we're creating a new file each time, so we just use write to overlay. But if we have a failure here, it's going to cause an exception, an OS error exception. Then the except block of code will run. And we're checking if in our hands is true, just like last time. And in our hands should be false unless we supply a command line argument. Then it will be true. If it's true, this time I'm not going to print out the clipboard. You could if you wanted to, but sometimes clipboard data can be quite large. So I figured I don't really care to see it on the screen for some type of failure. So I'm just printing an error message for us to see. But if you wanted to print the clipboard data, all you have to do is put paste, this function, inside the print function as the argument, and it would print it. And we don't have to cast to a string this time, because the paste function actually returns a string. So there's no need to do a cast. But we're going to consider this code's going to work usually, so we don't need to worry about the except so much. But we are covered for it. So we have the with context manager again, so that will open the file up, and it will handle closing the file. Notice the write method, where we write the file out, is indented underneath this with statement. Also using an F string, so putting in data store again in the curly braces. So it will evaluate whatever data store contains which will be the path. It'll put that there. I'm escaping the slash, so we'll have one slash, then clipboard underbar, then loop count is evaluated. It's an F string as well in the curly braces. Should evaluate to 1 the first time through. So essentially we're storing the file out into our path, clipboard underbar 1.txt. And the file handle here points to the file. Up above I used FH for file handle in the function. Here I'm just spelling it out, file underbar handle. Otherwise you'd have a warning. If I tried to use the same variable as in that function, PyCharm would give us a little warning about that. That's why I used a different variable name. Then we're just writing it out. And what's the argument for the write method here? Just the paste function. That's what obtains the data from the clipboard. And it returns a string, like I said, so no need to cast. Then down here, I have another exception, not the OS error. And I didn't know about this at first. I discovered this online somewhere. But there's a paperclip Windows exception that the author of the tool programmed in for us. So we can use that exception class. And if it occurs, what it means in Windows is that the computer screen is locked. So you won't be able to get the clipboard. It'll raise this exception. And my code originally was failing. And I saw that exception. I'm like, what is that? And I looked it up. And sure enough, if the screen is locked, the get clipboard will fail. So in this case, I'm just printing an error message. If in our hands is true, we'll get this error message on our screen. If the targeted user runs the code themselves and it's running in the background, and they lock their screen, nothing will happen. It's not going to print any error message, but it's also not going to have an exception because we handle it. We handle the exception. All right, I think we're good. There is one other thing, actually. This warning, I cannot get rid of. And I did some research on this, and the problem is the author of Paperclip did not make this exception class public. That's why it's given us this warning. I think it's a mistake on his part, and he just never has corrected it. But we can correct this ourselves. All we have to do is go into the project folder, go ahead and expand external libraries, then expand Python, and then site packages, expand that, then come down to Paperclip, expand it, then double click on Dunder init, right there. And at the bottom of Dunder init, you should see a Dunder all. That's where we'll paste it in, so to do a single quote, 2 single quotes, comma. And in between there, paste in that class name, which is Paperclip Windows exception. So it should look like that right there. So that should be good. So if I minimize this or close it, notice how that went away? So we just fixed the warning. Now be careful, make sure you're in the right area over here. It was under Python, then site packages, because there's several areas here that have Dunder init methods. So we should be good to test the code at this point. We've got all the code in. We're writing the file out, clipboard. So let's go ahead and run it. We can test the keylogger again as well if we want. That should be good. Should have a clipboard. I'll stop it. Okay. Let's pull up the... There, it took 3 clipboard shots. And I forgot to put something in my clipboard but for the video, but had something in there anyway. That's when I pasted in that exception class. There it is in my clipboard, Paperclip Windows exception. And the keylogger, look at that, clean as can be. So everything's working great. There's no problems here. I believe next lesson we will do the screenshots And then that should be pretty much it for the code. Almost. We'll see. So I'll see you next lesson.